Thank you very much, Mr. President, for that really generous introduction. And thank you all for having me here. This is, a lot of times I'll speak to groups that I don't really understand what they do, and sometimes I don't really care what they do. But, I know what you guys do, and like every American, just enormously appreciative of everything that you and your colleagues do and putting your lives on the line every single day. We all just appreciate that enormously, that not many people do that. Anyway, I'm going to jump in. I've been given a really tight time frame because you guys have had such a great program here, and you just heard from one of my favorite members of Congress. Steny Hoyer is just an incredibly stand-up guy, terrific guy. Earlier today, you heard from one of my favorite Republicans, Roy Blunt, and these two men represent just the very, very best of Congress. And I wish that we had 536 more people just like the two of them. Let me just jump right in. I think in Washington, people tend to watch campaigns the way sports fans watch sports, filling out your NCAA brackets or fantasy football or rotisserie baseball. But what's really important is, what's the outcome? What's coming out the other side? Are Republicans going to hold on to the House or not? Are Democrats going to be able to hold on to their majority in the Senate or not? What kind of Congress is President Obama going to be dealing with for his last 2 years in office? And sort of who's going to be making the policy decisions, and how will they be able to make those policy decisions? So what I'm going to do is start off with just offer up a handful of assumptions and things that I think are reasonably safe for us to think about or to look at as we approach this election and the next 2 years. The first one, and I hate saying this coming on the heels of my friend Steny Hoyer, but it would take something truly extraordinary for the House to flip over. And it just sort of is what it is. A lot of it has to do with redistricting, and that Democrats just caught a lousy break, losing so many state legislative seats and governorships back in 2010, that just before the congressional redistricting, part of it's that. Part of it is just that Democrats tend to live in very concentrated in urban areas, and Republicans are sort of spread out more. So, if you will, Republican voters are more efficiently spread around the country, spread among a lot of districts, and that gives them a little bit of an edge. But the House is very likely going to stay Democratic, and probably stay Democratic until the lines are redrawn and they have a chance to compete under different lines in 2022. And it just it is what it is. The Senate, that, as you know, is 55 Democrats, 45 Republicans. The Senate is going to be very, very, very closely divided coming out of this election. There's virtually not a chance that the majority party will have over 53 seats. There's a really good chance it'll be 52 or less. Quite good chance it'll be 51 or less, could be 50-50 with Joe Biden breaking the tie. But it's going to be very, very, very narrowly divided. And the odds for Democrats have gotten a lot worse in the last month or two. But I think one thing worth remembering, and I'll talk about this more in a couple minutes, but that even if Republicans score a net gain of 6 and get to 51, or 7 and 52. In 2016, the shoe's on the other foot, and it's Republicans that are vastly overexposed. They've got 24 Senate seats up versus only 10 for Democrats, and a bunch of those 24 Republican seats that are up in 2016, a lot of those are in states that Obama carried. And so you could see either Democrats are going to barely hold on to their majority or lose it this time, but there's a really good chance that Democrats might pick up a seat or 2 or 3 in 2016. So I think it's safe to say it's going to be sort of teetering on the edge. The third assumption I would make is that governorships, the Democrats are actually the one bright light probably for Democrats this election is going to be governorships. And again, it's because, you know, in the House, you always look 2 years earlier. That's when because the House has 2-year terms, that's when the cards are dealt or the table set for whatever election we're dealing with. In the Senate, it's 6 years earlier. Well, in governorships, it's 4 years earlier. And because Republicans had such an incredible year in 2010, they're coming in way overexposed in the governor's races. So while the House, we're not expecting a huge change in the House, we're expecting a very good year for Republicans in the Senate and a really good year for Democrats in the governorships. And it just sort of is the nature of the calendar. So the governorships, Democrats are going to close some ground in on the governorships. I think the fourth assumption that I would make is that I think President Obama's job approval numbers are not going to change a whole lot from where they are right now. And when you look at sort of the most reliable polling on a bad day the president's approval numbers range from 38 to 45 or 46, say 38 to 46. And any day, if you're watching the Gallup nightly tracking or you look at any of the other polls, you know, anytime he's at 38 or 39, you can kind of bet that the next poll will be a little bit higher. When he's at 45, 46, you can kind of bet on the next poll being a little lower. But if he were a stock, you would say he's got a narrow trading range of between 38 and 46, averaging about 41. With disapprovals around 53, 54, 55. And to be honest, I don't think that's likely to change for the next 3 years. It would take some pretty cataclysmic event because the president, he's got a high floor, you know, bedrock support among certain groups, and then he's got pretty awfully adamant opposition as well. So he's got a high floor, a low ceiling, not a lot of variability. But what that means is that he's going to be underwater, likely to be underwater for the next 3 years in terms of disapproval higher than approval. And it just sort of is what it is. The fifth assumption that I would make is that the president's relations with Congress isn't likely to get any better. Now, you have to be more specific. You know, he has no relationship with sort of the Tea Party, most conservative elements of the Republican Party, but then again, Speaker Boehner has no relationship with them either. So they're sort of over here. Then you have sort of the establishment Republicans over here, and the president's got a lousy relationship with them. But what a lot of people outside of Washington don't understand is that the president doesn't have that great a relationship with a lot of Democrats on Capitol Hill. And, you know, he wasn't up there as a senator for very long. They just don't, you know, they just don't connect with each other very well. And you know, there are a bunch of reasons. I think a lot of it has to do with sort of the president's personality. One of President Obama's former top people once said to me that you have to understand, here's the difference between Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. That Bill Clinton is like a dog. He craves your attention, your love, your affection. He walks into a room, he could figure out who doesn't like him in the room and wants to convert them. But he just wants you to love him. And President Obama is a little bit more like a cat, kind of cool, aloof, distant, doesn't really need your love particularly. And, you know, if you think about a cat, you know, water, food, litter change, he's good. Now, a psychiatrist would probably tell you that President Obama is an emotionally healthier person. You know, he's not needy. But the thing is, in terms of politics and in terms of dealing with Congress, politicians want to be stroked. They want to be courted. They want to be loved. And, you know, for President Obama, it's kind of like that movie came out a few years ago. He's just not that into you. And you know, it is what it is. And, you know, you probably don't go over and play pool with him real often. And there have probably been other times when, you know.
But we did go to the movies with Clinton.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it just is what it is. And, you know, whatever. That's sort of the next assumption. The last two, I would assume, assumptions I would make is that with Congress sort of unable to do much, and to do much at all, that to the extent that it's possible, you are going to see the president and the administration doing anything or everything they can that doesn't require permission from Congress. And so through the regulatory, you could see NLRB stuff. I mean, but to the extent they can get away with it, they will fill the void if it doesn't require getting Congress to pass something. So you'll kind of see that, and and the final one would be that to the extent that state government is able to assert themselves, filling a void that Washington isn't filling, you will see them try to do it, although the number of issues they could do that in is pretty limited. As I said, the House isn't going to go anywhere, so real quickly about the Senate, this is about exposure. And because Democrats had such a terrific year in 2008, now that these seats are up, they're just way overexposed. And there are three Democratic, keep in mind Republicans need a net gain of 6, there are three Democratic seats that I think are pretty much gone for them. It's open seats in Montana, in South Dakota, and West Virginia. And, you know, a miracle could happen that Democrats could hang on to one of them, but I kind of doubt it. And then you come into a set of Democratic seats that are just in real serious danger. Mark Begich in Alaska, Mark Pryor in Arkansas, Mary Landrieu in Louisiana, Kay Hagan in North Carolina, and most recently added to the list, Mark Udall in Colorado, where Republicans had a nutball that was running and they pulled the nut out and put in a stronger candidate a week or so ago, and that one now is going to be a top tier race. And then we're sort of keeping an eye on New Hampshire with Jean Shaheen and now Scott Brown's running, and then don't forget the Michigan Senate race, an open seat that right now is effectively it's a toss-up. And there are some other places to kind of keep your eye on, you know, Iowa, and I know you're big supporters of Bruce Braley. You know, he's looking pretty good right now, but you know, in this kind of environment, you just don't know. I mean, let's face it. This is, as a Democratic consultant said to me recently, you know, this is an ugly environment for Democrats, and every Democratic candidate campaign has to bring their A game this year. And it's just the way it is. And part of it is the president's approval numbers are so low. A lot of it is the Affordable Care Act numbers are extremely low. And these things just aren't likely to change between now and the election. And the way that really comes in is that because the turnout in a presidential year, it's so much bigger and more broad-based, and it looks more or less like the country. But in midterm elections, they don't look quite so much like the country. They're older electorates, they're whiter electorates, they're now increasingly more conservative electorates, so that it's really tough ground. And take that special election last week in Florida. It was, you know, we knew it was going to be really close, but you know, frankly, I thought Democrats were going to eke out a small win, and they ended up losing it. And it's just the Democratic vote didn't come out. And it's you know, when you've got a vote that was so keyed among young people and minority voters towards this person, President Obama, it was very personalized. And when you have just sort of some generic Democrat running whose name isn't Barack Obama and doesn't have that sort of sex appeal that President Obama has with some of these voters, they're not going to show up. And that's going to be a huge challenge for Democrats this year. And, you know, as I said, it is what it is. It's going to be a very tough election. I think now the odds of Republicans taking the Senate have just sort of moved over on the other side of 50-50, the high side of 50-50, but you know, it's going to be awfully close. Real quickly, let me just touch for the 3 minutes I have left on 2016 presidential. You know, we could talk about, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do that, but anyway.
Take all the time you need. Take the time.
Did you hear that? Okay. Everybody got witnesses. He said I can take a little bit more time.
The check.
There we go. There we go. Hey, I'm doing this for free. What are you talking about?
I meant their check.
This is one of these things where, you know, David Billy says, Charlie, do you believe in free speech? And I said, of course I do. And he said, I would like to give one. So anyway, so let's talk about, So let's talk a little bit about first the Democratic side. Look, okay, hold on to your chairs. In all probability, Hillary Clinton's going to run, and in all probability, she'll probably win the Democratic nomination. I know that's shocking to you. I would just, though, keep in the back of your mind, there is a chance, maybe 30% or something. There's a chance that she doesn't run. And I know she probably is, and I think she will, but keep in mind that these decisions, they're not just political decisions, they're also personal decisions. And for Hillary Clinton, right now, she's 66 years old. She'll be turning 67 in October, so this time next year when she makes her mind up, she'll be 67, turning 68 in October of 2015, and so she'll be 68 and just turning 69 2 weeks before the 2016 election. I am not saying that her age would be a big problem for her. After all, she will be exactly the same age Ronald Reagan was when he first got elected in 1980. But what I'm suggesting is that people who are, as she will be this time next year, 67 years old, don't generally make 9-year commitments lightly. And that's exactly what she'll be asked to do. 1 year for running, 4 years for a first term. I never saw anybody take a first term as the president that didn't want a second term as president. And the question is, does she feel up to it? Now, the thing is, nobody has to explain to Hillary Clinton how arduous it is running for president, having watched her husband do it twice and she's done it once. But she knows how grueling it is. And I just turned 60. There's things that I don't like to do now that I was okay with 2 or 3 years ago. But the thing is, I spent one day traveling with her and her entourage in Iowa back in December of 2007. And we met down the lobby of a hotel around 6:30 in the morning, and we got back to that hotel a little bit before 2 a.m. the next day. And that day beat the hell out of me, and I'm a hell of a lot younger than she is. And the thing about it is, and you remember the last 6 months, a year, she was Secretary of State. That job kind of ground her down a little bit. I mean, and she had some health issues and fainted and all that. So I'm just saying there's a chance that that she just decides, you know what, I'd love to do this, I'd love to be president, but man, I just don't feel up to it. And when the hell is Chelsea going to give me a grandkid anyway? And so, I'm just saying, so the Democrats ought to have in the back of their mind sort of a plan B. Now, assuming Hillary Clinton does run, which I do think that she will, I'm assuming that Vice President Biden doesn't run. Now, he says his decision will be absolutely independent of any decision that Hillary Clinton makes. Yeah, right. And I love Joe Biden, but look, Biden will be turning 74 a couple months after the 2016 election. And 74-year-olds, wow, that's starting to get up there, And I personally, I like Joe Biden a lot. I think it's a lousy idea for him to run. And ultimately, I don't think he will. And the thing is, I think if Hillary Clinton does run, though, I think Joe will make the right decision and not run. The challenging thing would be, what if she doesn't run? Will Joe still make the right decision and not run? Or let me rephrase that, can he help himself? But I personally, it's just someone that's very fond of him. I hope he doesn't. I don't think it would end well. Assuming Hillary Clinton does run, I'm assuming that Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, will not run. I'm assuming the 3 women most often mentioned as potential candidates won't run, meaning Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. I don't think they'll run if Hillary runs. I think that there are some people that probably will. I think Howard Dean may very well run anyway. Brian Schweitzer, the former governor of Montana, he might do it. Governor Martin O'Malley of Maryland, maybe does, maybe doesn't. But, he might be the only sort of mainstream Democratic establishment figure that might take her on just on the off chance, hey, maybe she falters, stumbles, has a health issue, nobody expects me to win. Worst that come to worst, I ended up with a cabinet job, And so because nobody thought Bill Clinton had a chance when he got in back in early 1991 or mid-1991 anyway, either. Now, if Hillary doesn't run, Katie bar the door. Just big field, enormous numbers running, and who the hell knows what will happen. I don't think it'd be Joe Biden, but at that point, it's just absolutely wide open. Looking over at the Republican side, I don't, everybody wants to, what about Chris Christie? Well, the thing is, obviously this bridge stuff hurts him badly, but I don't think he was the front runner for the Republican nomination anyway. I mean, think about it for a second. Think about the heart and soul of the people who make nominating decisions for Republicans. Think about who they seriously considered for the Republican nomination last time before, as a last resort, they settled on Mitt Romney. I mean, think about it roughly from right to left. We're talking about, I'm sorry, I'm sort of blanking out. Rick Santorum, Herman Cain, my favorite, Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry, Newt Gingrich. They never even looked at Huntsman. And again, they settled on Romney. Now, think about this. Think about Bachmann, Cain, Santorum, Perry, Newt, Chris Christie. You know that song from Sesame Street? One of these things is not like the others. One of these things is not. You can't say Chris Christie's name in the same context as Michelle Bachmann and Herman Cain and some of these other people. You just simply can't. And these are people they seriously looked at, and at some point along the way, they were front runners. And so now, it might be very, very smart for Republicans to nominate somebody from, say, the 35, 40-yard line on the right end of the field for winning a general election, but that's not what they want, and I don't think the parties don't generally move to the middle that much unless they've had a devastating election otherwise. I mean, after Barry Goldwater went off a cliff for Republicans in '64, Republicans moved towards the middle and then nominated Richard Nixon and won the presidency. After Democrats went off the cliff in '72 with George McGovern, they moved to the middle. They nominated Jimmy Carter, and they won that time. Or in a slightly different context, after Democrats lost the presidency 3 times in a row, 1980, 84, 88, they moved to the middle with Bill Clinton. And so parties they have to kind of hit rock bottom before they move to the middle, and Republicans haven't hit rock bottom yet. The second person from sort of the center-right position, Jeb Bush, I just don't think he's going to run. And the thing about it is what's important to know is that Governor Bush's wife was born in Mexico, and which is unimportant except for one thing, she despises politics. She resents every moment he ever spent doing politics. And so the thing about never moved to Tallahassee, the state capital, when he was governor. And so the thing is, you have to think about, can you really run for president with a non-supportive spouse? I don't think you can. Man, this is ugly enough. There are a couple other reasons. I just don't think he's going to run. So what we're left with very quickly is you've got the people that run for president before. You could call them the recidivists. I mean, you've got Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum going after sort of the evangelical Christian conservative part. You've got Rick Perry running wherever Rick Perry runs. After the last election, Perry said, well, I wanted to run for president in the worst way, and I did. Anyway, and so then you move over to the Tea Party senators, Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. And the thing that's so interesting about this is that Ted Cruz is what we thought Rand Paul was going to be. In other words, come to Washington, come into the Capitol building with an Uzi, spraying it in every direction, rolling grenades down the center aisle of the Senate, basically being the most disruptive influence he could possibly be, alienating, virtually all of his colleagues. And the thing is that, and Rand Paul, I mean, is he extremely, extremely, extremely conservative? Of course he is. But he sort of played better with the other kids in the sandbox than anybody ever thought. But the thing is, I moved to Washington in September '72, started working on Capitol Hill while I was in college, January '73. So I've watched this a while. I have never seen any new member of Congress, Democrat or Republican, House or Senate, alienate more people in both parties as fast as Ted Cruz has. And the fact is that every time Ted Cruz opens his mouth, Rand Paul seems a little more reasonable. Or let me put it into context, knowing that there are no firefighters in the Senate. If Ted Cruz collapsed in the center aisle of the U.S. Senate, Mike Lee from Utah is the only conceivable person that would go check on him. I mean, it just flat wouldn't happen. I mean, and Mitch McConnell would just walk into the cloakroom and just pretend, if not step on his throat. But anyway, so Rand Paul, is what he is, but the thing is, I would keep an eye on him in that Tea Party space. If a Tea Party person gets the Republican nomination, I'd watch him. In terms of the non-Tea Party, but really conservative governors, I don't think it's going to be Bobby Jindal from my home state of Louisiana. I don't think it'll be Kasich from Ohio. I tell you what, Ritalin would change John Kasich's life. Mike Pence, with Pence, governor of Minnesota, he's sort of Tim Pawlenty without the sex appeal, or Indiana. He's a Tim Pawlenty without the sex appeal. I mean, white bread people don't win nominations anymore. They just sort of don't. The guy I would watch, and I know your folks probably don't like him a bit, is Scott Walker. Don't kill the messenger here. I'm just telling you that I would watch him. I would watch him very carefully. That could happen. Now, then you get to the sort of establishment, Capitol Hill. I don't think you're going to see anybody really. I mean, Paul Ryan is probably going to be chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, if not run for speaker if Boehner steps down. Rob Portman's going to run for re-election. I think he'd like to be vice president. Marco Rubio is sort of the one guy I would kind of look at, keep an eye on over there. But to be honest, I frankly think that the Republican nomination is going to come down to Rand Paul or Scott Walker, most likely. Again, keeping an eye out for Rubio against either Hillary Clinton, or if she falters or more likely or doesn't run, just gosh knows whoever. But at the end of the day, let me just close on this. The end of the day in 2016, it's going to turn, I think, as much on two things as on who the personalities are. And these are the same two things that I think are going to decide what 2014 is like. On the one hand, to what extent do Republicans fix their problems, both in terms of their brand, but also very specific problems they have with minority voters, young voters, women voters, moderate voters, and fix their problem of nominating people who have a propensity, as they have in the last two elections, for pulling the pins on hand grenades and swallowing them. I mean, there's been. So to what extent do Republicans fix their problems versus, on the other hand, where's the president's approval rating, where's the favorable, unfavorable, or approval, disapproval of the Affordable Care Act, and how much of a weight is that weigh down Democrats? And so ultimately, that's going to decide. I mean, what's the inherent intrinsic value of a Republican nomination, of a Democratic nomination? It's going to be determined by those factors as much as by the people. So I've gone way over time. Thank you very much for everything you do. We just all owe all of you an enormous debt of gratitude. And I think really until 9/11, I don't know that the American people really understood the appreciation that they do have and always have had. I don't think they really realized it until then. And so it's kind of like the men and women coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, that they're being treated a heck of a lot better than their fathers or mothers did coming back from Vietnam. Only now are veterans being appreciated the way they should have been all along. And I think now firefighters and other first responders, you are just now getting the appreciation that you've always deserved. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.